we are at the driver's seat of our own lives and we're doing what we truly want to do, as opposed to kind of going through the motions or letting someone else live our life for us. And so it's been incredible to, one, have a partner that supports the crazy guy who wants to read all the books and listen to all the podcasts and write books of their own and do a podcast. It takes a very, very special partner to not only help with that, but just support and be the rock and be the foundation. I don't know how many conversations my wife has just had to kind of listen to me rant about a concept or a thing that I'm working on. And yeah, it's amazing to have that person. And now to have a child that you bring into the world that you get to help love and shape and mold and help them see the example that you're trying to set for not only yourself, but the community around you. There's no more powerful thing in the world.
Thank you for tuning in to the Mile 40 podcast. I am Bishoy Tadros, the author of Break Barriers and Audacious, both of which are sold on Amazon. And I invite you to join me as I engage with guests to discuss those bounce back moments that we encounter on our personal journey. Mile 40 is a forum to learn about how athletes, professionals, and leaders of all backgrounds stare down moments in life where the only option is to rise up. The Mile 40 podcast strives to remind listeners that the comeback is always greater than the setback. Welcome back to another episode of the Mile 40 podcast. Thank you all for continuing to tune in. It is greatly appreciated. I hope everybody is having a great start to the year. If you haven't already, please be sure to hit subscribe. If you're listening on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube, check out the show notes, pick up a copy of Break Barriers or Audacious. I'll sign it, send it out myself. Today's guest is a guest I'm very excited to have. I have Kyle Gonzalez with me. He brings over a decade of experience as a performance coach, teacher, and director of strength and conditioning. He's a former D1 basketball player who has been featured in top-tier publications such as Men's Health, The Washington Post, NBC News, and Real Simple for his work in the fitness industry. He has an extensive startup experience, having played a key role in scaling companies like the St. James Future and Momentous. Kyle is also the author of The Vitality System, which I got right here. Yeah. And he hosts the Vitality System podcast, where he shares his expertise and passion for health and wellness. Kyle, thank you for joining me.
Yeah, wow. What an intro. Thank you for having me. And right back at you. I got your book Audacious right here. So yeah,
I love it.
Good start to the new year.
Yeah, man. One of the things I really liked about what you sent over is you sent me your professional bio and your personal bio. And I really just wanted to read your personal bio, but I said, let me just give the audience a little bit of a glimpse into who you are on paper, because we're going to dive into all things personal now. So I'm really glad that we met. You're part of this wonderful group of people that I've met through Brian Von Enken, who's been a previous guest on the show, and his mastermind. And everyone that has come from the mastermind has been really, really phenomenal for the show. And I have no doubt, you're going to continue that trail. So let's get things started really quick. I kind of gave the high level bio. Tell us a little bit about where you're from, where you grew up, and where things kicked off for you.
Yeah, no, for sure. I grew up in Northern Virginia. So we say Northern Virginia, but I always say right outside of DC, the DMV area. And I was there for the greater part of the first 20 to 25 years of my life. I was a big basketball and performance guy, so wanted to play sports my whole life, played football, baseball, basketball, but took a liking to basketball. And that's kind of where this health and wellness tilt came for me. I always wanted to learn how I could get stronger, faster, better. And I was a late bloomer. So I was like 5'8" and, 135 pounds soaking wet going into high school. So football wasn't for me. But over time, I learned that I could kind of do things that weren't really popular back then, the things that are crazy now in the wellness world of like, getting up early and working out, strength training, supplements, all of these different things. I like to dabble in all of that at a really young age in high school. And so I started to figure out that I could outsmart people and I could work harder than people. And from there, I just took that and ran with it and played basketball in college and really just started to dig my teeth into this thing called health and wellness. So that's kind of where it started. But yeah, back on the East Coast.
Love it. What position did you play?
I played a little bit of shooting guard and small forward, and I played for a school called Radford. So they're Division I, And we actually, for like 2 or 3 years that I was there, had the shortest team by height in the entire country. So yeah, so I played, two, three, four, and yeah, it was a great experience, and yeah, missed a lot of my teammates, and still get to connect with them from time to time again.
What year did you graduate college?
I graduated my undergrad in 2016.
Okay.
Yeah.
So who would you say you modeled your game around?
Uh, that's a good question. It's a very good question. I was very much like a 3 and D kind of guy. Like I really wanted to be a good defender, like a slasher. So yeah, no, I don't know specifically, but I wanted to just, yeah, be a solid defender and kind of take opportunistic threes and opportunities when I had them. So yeah, maybe like a Clay Thompson or like some sort of slasher shooter, good defender. So yeah, that's kind of where I'd go.
Okay. All right. I mean, 3 and D is I mean, I'm a big Knicks fan.
Okay.
All right. So we got OG right now.
Yep.
And right when they picked him up, they said, he's the 3 and D guy. He's the guy that's gonna, change the dynamic of this team. And I remember last year they picked him up, and immediately, the impact was there. And so that kind of brings me back, to what you had said earlier that I wanted to circle back to was, you know, you had looked around and you had noticed that you could figure out a way to distinguish yourself by, working harder, or, than the people around you. And I feel like that's a common thread amongst a lot of people who've been on this show. But there's got to be some external forces that come to play. Talk to me about your influences growing up. Talk to me about your family life.
Yeah, no, for sure. And definitely some influences. So I'll start with my dad. He was a big explorer, definitely always taking us out, seeing the world, seeing new perspectives, seeing new cultures. And so that really influenced me to be kind of mentally flexible and perspective, mentally flexible in how I saw the world. Unfortunately, my father passed away from colon cancer when I was 8 years old. So still have very, very great memories of the times we spent, the traveling and all of that. But it kind of put health and wellness front and center in my life at an early age. And it showed me that, wow, like there are a lot of things that kind of can change the face of your health and how you live and all of that. And so my mom on the other side, she was just like this selfless kind of do it all type of do it yourself person. And she like is where I kind of learned how to work hard. She is where I learned to be selfless because she has always worked in kind of the healthcare industry. And she took on 3 kids at 8, 10, and 13, and was a single mother who raised us all. And yeah, I think from that, I saw her take care of the house. I saw her putting food on the table. I saw her working multiple jobs. I saw her doing everything it took to give us the life that we sought out. And so yeah, from that, it was always just a curiosity around one, how can I be selfless and how can I give back to my community, my family? And then also this kind of curiosity from my dad's side of how can I learn more? How can I explore it and all of that? And I think that kind of coalesced into this journey into health and wellness because, again, my father passed away from cancer. And so I always wanted to understand like, is there anything he could have done to prevent? Is there things that could have gone differently and kind of looking at that? So, yeah, those are kind of the influences of my early life. Also, have a brother and sister. So, just always competitive, always, kind of learning and different things through that journey. So, yeah, it's been a great kind of upbringing, and I owe a lot to my family and my parents for where I am now.
Where were you in the order of your siblings?
I'm the youngest. I'm the youngest. So yeah, I got to do all the learning, soaking up everything, and yeah, it's been cool.
I'm trying to figure out. There's something about you that definitely distinguishes you. Like you have this glow and this optimism, this positive attitude that you project. And I mean, I go back to your childhood, and correct me if I'm wrong. I'd have to assume the passing of your father was probably one of the most pivotal moments of your childhood.
Yep, yep,
How did you
100%.
how did you handle it when it occurred? Maybe relative to your siblings.
Yeah. Yeah, for me, a lot of like at that age, it's hard to process and you don't really understand everything. So all I could do was try to be positive and try to be strong for my mom so she didn't have to really worry about me. So that kind of put on me like early of like, you know what can I do so that mom doesn't have to think about anything with when it comes to Kyle, my grades, sports, all of that stuff. I wanted to kind of be self-sufficient. And I think for me, I was very expressive. I did a lot of I talked to a lot of people, therapists, and all of that at a young age. And so I think I was able to process a lot of these emotions that came along with it and just talk about them, and address them and face them head on. And so I think now it has helped me as a communicator. It has helped me kind of not be scared to write books or do a podcast or do any of these things because, again, I've always been comfortable in my own skin. And I've always been someone who's, not afraid to be authentically me.
I asked this question once before with someone else who had a similar story around losing a parent at a young age. When you think about the 8 years that you had with your father, um, what do you remember most, or what attribute did your father, imprint in you the most that you hope to carry forward, now that you're the man that you are?
Yeah, no, I smile because, yeah, we have a concept at a company that I work for called Koya called being a thermostat. I think my father was the ultimate thermostat of setting the temperature of any room that he was in. Just so charismatic. You could put him in a room with people he had no idea who was in there, and he would get everybody smiling, laughing, talking. And I think for me, I try to exude that energy with every conversation I approach. And I like to see everybody as a human being. Like we're all common, have that common thread. We're all human beings. So whatever background you come from, whatever culture you've grown up in, there's always something to like learn as you have a conversation with someone. And so that's why I love the field of coaching and health and wellness, because again, you can just start to build relationships and see people for who they really are and kind of learn and grow. And through that learning and growing, then I have insights of like, wow, I can be doing something different in my life or in my relationship or in my family or in my community. So yeah, I think that energy and being a thermostat of really, really like understanding that every situation is what you make it. And so again, seeing the best in certain situations and bringing energy that can light people up.
Thank you for that. And I think that, like, I say this with all sincerity. I do believe that people who exude, you know, that kind of characteristic are the people who are the change agents, essentially. Like someone like your father, and now you following in his footsteps, you are the people that are letting your actions, speak for themselves. As you carry forward. What I want to get to is, you had mentioned early on experiencing your father's passing and then quickly wanting to identify, could it have been avoided? What does one have to do to avoid this? I have to imagine that maybe you were thinking these things at the age of 8, but there's a huge difference between thinking them at the age of 8 versus, now. Um, and another thing that I'm thinking of is, given where you were as an athlete and how you built yourself up as an athlete, it's no small task, making it to a D1 program and playing D1. And a lot of that is centered around being an individual contributor, right? A lot of it is like me, me, me. How can I make myself better? How can I make my game better? How can I get seen? How can I get recognized? How can I get the attention out there? And a lot of what you're doing now is not about you. So I want to build from, where you were able to kind of transition from taking care of yourself and building yourself to that being that athlete, that elite athlete, to now building a platform that's centered around helping others. So I guess the best place to start is take me back to high school. You're a little bit older now. Talk to me about how you're starting to kind of put the pieces together back then.
Yeah, no, it's great framing and great question. I think starting in high school was really when I started to have like a self-awareness of having control over certain things. When you're in middle school or elementary school, it's like you're not necessarily controlling what you eat or, certain things around movement and all that. So for me, when I got to high school, my independence started to shine. And through that, I realized like, okay, I can, move more. I can work out and I can do these things to get better in the sport, but also like get better as just a human being. So I was like the person who was going before school. Me and my best friend Yannick, we would go to like work out before school. So like 5 a.m. workouts. And again, as middle schoolers and freshmen in high school, that wasn't really big then, maybe bigger now. And so that was one of the first things is like, okay, having a self-awareness and understanding where these categories lie. The next was nutrition. Obviously, middle school, high school, not many kids are worrying about cutting out soda or supplements they can take, or things like that. And granted, at that time, we probably weren't taking the right things, or doing things perfectly, but we still had that curiosity to try. And, we were doing things like pre-workout supplements and trying to do vitamins and minerals and things like that, which again, for a high school student, you don't see often. And then the last thing for me was really, really focusing on school. And again, that sounds kind of like cliche, like, but I really wanted to learn and be the best student I could be, so that I could set myself up to get into a college that I could walk on to, or I could play basketball at. And so it started to click for me that I had special interests, and like I really loved health and wellness. So how could I have classes and electives that I could really dive into these things? And so at a young age, I really started to develop that curiosity, and I started to follow what athletes were doing, and getting into the weeds on some of these performance things that back, 10, 15 years ago, it wasn't really mainstream at that time. There wasn't cold plunges and saunas and hyper ice guns and things like that back then. It was more of just like, hey, you got to do the hard work and you got to be consistent with it. So I would say those are some of the things that came to mind.
Yeah. No, I mean, you're right. It's definitely, you were in a unique generation too, because you
Yeah.
graduated high school, what, in 2012?
Yep.
So, that was like the age, that was the first period where like 2008, that's when iPhones came out, right? So you were in the first age of like social media. Like I don't even remember high school back then. Did you have social media in high
Yeah.
school?
I think we had MySpace in high school, and Facebook was starting to make its way. But
Yeah.
that's a great point, because like all I remember from elementary school, middle school, early days of high school is going outside. We played video games, and all of that, but like we did everything outside. So I would just drop my backpack, go run outside, go play, and then when it was dark out, come back home. And so yeah, there was never a time like we had AIM, so we would chat
Yeah, yeah,
sometimes,
yeah.
but it was always like, where do you want to meet? Let's go play manhunt, or let's go play tag, or let's go play football or wiffle ball, or so yeah, times have definitely changed, but I'm glad that I was at that intersection of social media and pre-social media, because yeah, seeing what it is now is it's going against the grain these days.
Well, it's so funny, like, I graduated college in 2009, so I'm 7 years older than you, um and I just can't remember life before iPhones, and I don't even think
Yeah.
iPhones weren't even out when I was in college,
Yeah.
and so it's crazy, but, you talk about experimenting and trying, all those new formulas, and it was a unique time to be doing that, is what I'm getting at, given, how much access to information that you have now. So talk to me about how that carried over, or maybe I should ask before we go there. Talk to me about the recruiting process.
Yeah, or lack thereof.
Okay.
I would say for me, I wasn't this like highly touted recruit. I played like freshman basketball, JV basketball, and then 2 years of varsity. I dealt with a knee injury when I was a junior, and we got a new coach. So it's kind of like coming into my senior year where I was supposed to like shine and all of that. We had a new coach, didn't really know who I was. Played a system that was a little bit interesting. So I wasn't highly recruited. I wasn't, somebody that was at the top of people's lists. But I think throughout the season, I started to build up kind of a Rolodex of connections and coaches and people that I knew in schools that I had talked to. I did a lot of camps. And so there wasn't, AAU wasn't as big back then as it is now. And I mean, way less exposure. There wasn't social media. Like I had to use the software Huddle and create my own highlight tape
Huh.
and send it out. Um, and so, yeah, I had talked to the coaches at Radford. I knew this was an in-state school. I wanted to stay in state for tuition reasons and price. And so I knew this was a school. I knew the coaches. And so I sent out feelers of like, hey, I would love to like come early, practice with the team, or do whatever I can to walk on. They said, great, that's awesome. We have a walk on tryout. You'll have to try out like everybody else. And I had a couple other options to maybe go D3 and all of that, but I really like wanted to set my sights playing Division 1 basketball, because I really thought that my skill level had developed from that. And so, yeah, a lot of off-season work, preparation. I had a basketball hoop in front of my house, which I got when I was maybe 10 or 11. I spent more time with that thing than any person through those years ever could. Um, and so yeah, it was a lot of just trying to build myself up and get my confidence to where when I got to that tryout, I was going to do everything I could to make the team. And yeah, sure enough, I got accepted to Radford, which was great. Then, first month or two, we had the tryout, and yeah, I with everybody else, there's maybe 50 or so people. I ended up making the team. And then from there, yeah, the rest is history of kind of working up the chain. And at the beginning, admittedly, they treat you kind of like you're just a manager and all that until you prove yourself. But yeah, to set my sights on that goal and to really lock in and know that was kind of the thing I was going for, and then to get it was awesome. And from there, it was all about like, I'm not going to squander this opportunity. I'm going to do everything in my power to be the best basketball player, the best teammate, to coach, to learn, and all of that. So yeah, that's kind of the segue from high school to college.
Earlier, you talked about your role on the court, right? A 3 and D
Yeah.
player. Talk to me about your role in the locker room. What kind of player were you in the locker room?
Yeah, no, I think this goes back to kind of being my authentic self. I think players coming from all different backgrounds, cultures, socioeconomic status, everything. I kind of came in and set the tone of like, hey, I'm going to be the guy that's going to do the right thing, who's going to go to class, who's going to, raise the team GPA because I loved like learning about my major, which was exercise science at the time. But also just a coach on the floor. Like I was really interested in, seeing plays and understanding schemes and things like that, and really being able to teach younger players when I got into my senior years of like how these things operate. Also, our culture of showing up on time, being prepared for lifts, being prepared for film sessions, being early to games, being early to shoot arounds, all of those types of things, building that culture so that the groups that came after me could then pass that on. And fittingly, the year after I left, we actually won our conference and went
Of
to the
course,
tournament.
that's how it
So
works.
that's always how it works. But it's incredible to pay it forward and see the success that the Radford program is having now. And yeah, my senior class had the most wins in Radford program history as a class. So we enjoyed a lot of success, and it was a great time there.
That's amazing. When you think about the tools, you've built over the course of that period, um, I think there's a lot to be said about college sports in general and about the preparation that goes into being a college athlete and the expectations for being a college athlete. And this was pre NIL, so a whole different ball game from that perspective as well. Um, and a lot of times, a lot of people, especially in the D1 world, I'm sure a lot of people graduate and then there's an adjustment period, right? Like, because you were defined by it. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. You're on campus and you're defined by your sport. And then you go out into the real world and then you need to kind of figure out who you are, if you're not getting drafted at that point. Uh, was there a struggle there at all for you?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think there was a struggle, but I knew early on that I loved this thing called health and wellness. I loved my major. It was actually called health and human performance, and then they changed it to exercise science. But I loved that aspect of it to the point where we would have practice, and since I was a walk on, I didn't structure my schedule around practice because I didn't know when practice was going to be. I would go to practice, then leave practice to go to class, then come back to practice and then do our lift and do our film session. And no other athlete on the team did that. And the coach noticed that I was coming back and jumping back into practice. And one day he called it out in front of the team, like that I didn't have to be coming back. Like I could just go to class and then stay. But that was how much I enjoyed learning about the human body, what it's capable of, how to be more healthy, how to perform better, how to live better. And so, yeah, that kind of led me to understand that, hey, if this basketball thing doesn't work out, I really, really enjoy kind of this exercise science realm. And whether it's being a coach or a trainer or an exercise physiologist or a strength conditioning coach, like I knew that was going to be there. And my senior year, I actually won the fitness strength conditioning student of the year. So I knew in the back of my mind, like this is a realm and a path I can go. And I actually had the opportunity to try out for several pro teams. And again, It's not very glamorous. You go to these like tryouts. It's not like the NBA combine. You just have these players going to these small combines thinking they're going to get signed, and you get offers from small cities in Mexico and Costa Rica and all these places. And for me, the risk reward wasn't huge because you get a 1 year contract and it's not paying you a ton, and every year that you're doing that, you get 1 year and you got to prove yourself all over again at the same camps, the same everything. And you go through that cycle unless you can, be a big time player and land a contract in Europe or something and prove yourself and put good film out there. I didn't really want to run that rat race. So I really kind of had to let it go and kind of drop my ego and be like, do you really just want to say you're a professional basketball player, or do you want to contribute to this world in a greater way? And I wanted to do that through health and wellness. So uh, yeah, I made the decision to just say, hey, look, I'm going to drop this for now, and if it's something meant to be, it'll come back to me. But I ended up getting my master's in kinesiology, and that was one of the best decisions in my life because it exposed me to a higher level of what I thought was like, oh, I know a ton, and I think it's like the classic. The more you know, the more you understand you don't know. And so that curiosity of like, oh my God, there's so much that I still don't know about this field, and I can still go forage and learn and tell other people about it. And so that's what the master's degree did for me, and told me how to do proper research, told me how to conduct experiments better, told me how to actually get in the weeds and check data and all of that stuff. So definitely a skill set that I'm super, super thankful for, especially in this day and age of a sea of information and misinformation.
So, would you say that your education is your not so secret weapon, I guess, in this field? Because, and spoiler alert for the audience out there, you ran a marathon recently, and look, there's a huge difference in the fitness, the preparation that goes into running a marathon versus playing basketball at a high level, from so many different perspectives. Like, it's so funny because I used to love playing basketball as a kid, right? And I played, into the night, and it was all that I wanted to do growing up. And now that I'm like marathon running at a high level, I can't even imagine, pivoting on a basketball court. Like, the thought of like being on a basketball court, like my ankle just, you know, and it the borderline terrifies me to even think about it, which is so funny because as a youngster, I never thought I'd be a runner. Uh, and and so you know something that a lot of people don't know, based on your education. So talk to me about, how it's played a role.
Yeah, yeah. I think the education has been huge. It's helped me understand where to continue to look. It's helped me understand how to communicate information better. I taught I taught an undergraduate lab course, and so that was just my first soiree in kind of communicating health information. And there's classes that I bombed my class plan and all of that, but through that I started to learn that it's not necessarily all what you say, but how you deliver it. And so people will be more receptive to the information that you have to share if you deliver it the right way and if you deliver it at the right time. So I think the education was a huge piece to kind of give me a nice breadth of knowledge to kind of be able to pull on and to know where I need to dive deeper. I think the main thing for me was being like a scientist, is what I kind of call it. Like, I was a tinker, I was a doer, I was a like just go out and try it yourself person all throughout my time when I was educating, because it's like when you learn something, it's almost like that like new kid on Christmas feeling, wanting to play with the first toy that they open. That was me. Like, when I learned a concept, it was like, oh, like let's go test this, or oh, let's go do this and let's go try this thing. And so for me, I think that's what separated me from some of the other people who just wanted to be academics and just kind of live in the books. I loved living in the
You're
books,
applying it.
but I love to apply it. And so I think it's always been something that has just been at the core of who I am, is be a doer and try and make sure, again, you learn from your failures and you take these lessons and you apply them. But yeah, for me, I understand so many concepts and so many things so much better when I've actually lived them and kind of, had them play out in my life. So I think the education piece paired with just being a doer and being a scientist has been huge to just help me understand how to approach a lot of issues that we face today.
Hey all, it's me, Bishoy. As a marathon runner and endurance athlete, I've come to understand the importance of properly fueling your body for preparation and recovery. Every day, you get a shot at success. How you start your day typically paints a picture of what the rest of the day will look like. Start your day with a super convenient, healthy, and delicious nutritional win. Meal 1 by Creatures of Habit. Overnight oatmeal packed with 30 grams of plant-based protein, chia, flax, and pumpkin seeds. Vitamin D3, omega-3s, a probiotic, and digestive enzymes made in under 1 minute. Stop wasting time or worrying about what to eat as your first meal of the day. Start with meal 1. Visit creaturesofhabit.com, creatures spelled with a K, and use code MILE40 for 15% off a one-time purchase or the first subscription order payment. So I guess from a scientific lens, what did you learn the most about yourself during this journey? Like, what were you doing wrong? What were you doing right?
Yeah, I think a lot of what I was doing wrong came in kind of like the nutrition and recovery realms. Obviously, like as a college basketball player, you are burning an insane amount of calories per day. So you have to replace those. And so for us, it was like eat whatever was in front of you. And so we had buffets, obviously, in college. Chick-fil-A, I ate every day. Drinking. I didn't really drink soda or anything, but we're in college. I drank alcohol, like all these types of things, and not understanding how that affected my recovery and how I showed up as a person and a basketball player and then just a human. And so sleep was not something that I was like, oh, like prioritize sleep, like let me get my 7 to 8 hours, especially in college. But these things all started to shift when I got into my master's program and I started to learn in depth how much these things were affecting me. And then the changes that I made, like how big of effect it made on my energy and my mental like capacity. So I think those were two things like for me is like the movement. I was always someone who loved to run, who loved to play sports, who was pretty athletic. But I think from a nutrition standpoint, from a recovery standpoint, and the last one was from a mindset standpoint of just understanding, belief effects and kind of what I believed and how that influenced how I pursued things and all these different things. So yeah, those three categories are really where I was able to level up. And then after that, it was just about consistency and making sure you could maintain some of these things.
Got it. I love that. I mean, I think it takes a lot of self awareness, right?
Yeah.
To take a step back, especially because you don't want to sometimes admit that you're human, especially as an athlete. Right? Like, I think that, while a lot of times as athletes, like, we're obsessed with being better than we were, it's a tough pill to swallow sometimes when you have to make big changes. Uh, and so that's awesome to hear that. So now let's talk about how we kinda built that into a career essentially, right? Like how do we turn this passion, and this background, into a career and a platform?
Yeah, that was something that I wrestled with for a while, and I think I did a lot of sampling in the industry. I think I've had just about every job in the coaching industry is that you could have, from strength and conditioning to youth performance to personal training to group fitness instructor. Yeah, everything I kind of dabbled in just to figure out like what kind of lights my fire and what helps me reach the most people. And so I was able to work at this huge facility in the DMV called the St. James. It's like 450,000 square feet, basketball courts, hockey rinks, three-level gym, like performance, all of it. And that exposed me to a lot of different people, a lot of different industries. And so that was kind of the first place where I really leveled up. And from there, I think it was like I was doing personal training, I was doing basketball coaching, I was doing group fitness, but I felt like I could only affect like the people in my immediate environment. And for that, I really was like, I think there's a lot of things that people like I could share and I could help my community with, but like I'm confined to this physical environment. So that's when I started like, all right, should I write a book? Should I do a newsletter? Like a podcast wasn't big back then. So that's where those thoughts started to come. Meanwhile, I got a call for a job to go out to San Francisco this job Future. It's a one-on-one personal training app that pairs you with an expert coach, and they kind of walk along you with that journey. That came calling. And I think for me, it was like, I've lived in Virginia my whole life. I went to college in Virginia. I got my master's in Virginia. I'd never really ventured too much out of the state. That was kind of me breaking out of my shell and understanding if I really want to help a broader swath of people, I have to understand broader cultures and places and people. And so moving to San Francisco really opened my eyes to like, there's a bigger world outside of Virginia. Um, and so that was great. I got exposed to the startup world. I got exposed to Silicon Valley. I got exposed to really cool people, smart people. And from there, I kind of bounced around. I worked at Future. I worked at a company called Momentous. I traveled for a while, but I think ultimately the thread through all of that was how do I understand people better so I can help them, so I can speak their language, so I can kind of get to the core of what they need to hear and when they need to hear it. And through all that, that's when I felt the confidence. That's when I felt kind of the calling to then start to produce content, whether that's writing books, doing a newsletter, doing a podcast, and all those things.
I mean, look, this is no joke of a book because it's, I mean, as someone who's written books, um, like this is 300 pages ish almost of like valuable content. And you're not like storytelling, you're like sharing information, which is, in my opinion, harder than storytelling. And it's a whole different skill set. Like, it's very impressive that for multiple reasons, right? Like you don't often come across someone who's, hit the highest levels of their craft from like an athletic perspective, who is then able to like produce this. And it kind of projects to me like you must have been obsessed about this in a positive way, about this message.
Yeah. Yes. Yes, I can say that emphatically. And I was passionately curious, and I think one day it just came to me like I always dealt with the kind of imposter syndrome of like you're not a writer, like you can't write a book, you don't know what it takes to do that. Like, are you the right person to be talking about this information? Um, and so I had to convince myself I have to do this really, really well so that not only I'm okay with it, but I feel like it's going to be something, a resource that'll help people. And as I kind of was reading books my own, reading articles, doing research, and all of this stuff, I never really came across a book that laid out all like the totality of health and wellness, how to connect each dots and from nutrition to movement to recovery to stress, all of these things. Like I saw individual books on stress, individual books on sleep, individual books on nutrition. Nothing that brought it all together of like here is the guide to how to live active, healthy, and happy, like overall holistically. And so, of course, when you don't see something, you're like, hey, I'll fill that gap and I'll try and write that book. And so, a lot of research, a lot of time spent kind of understanding how to communicate these things the right way. I didn't want it to be super tied to me. I wanted it to just let the information win, try to present frameworks and things that can take people from knowledge to action to results, as opposed to just let me just regurgitate a lot of information at you. And so again, I really wanted to structure it in a way that people could not only learn the information but internalize it so that then they could go out and navigate their environment without needing a product or a service or a person. It was more of just like now you have your handbook that helps you understand how to make informed choices. And so I spent a lot of time thinking about how to structure it, a lot of time thinking about how to write the chapters and how to provide tools and things like that. I'm like infinitely grateful of where it turned out, and I'm infinitely grateful of the process of just going through writing and how hard it was, because I really like started to realize that this it's worth it. If it's hard, it's worth it. Like, and if I can get through this, um, and I'll also say, thank God I did it before the age of Chat GPT and AI, because I feel like it's authentically me and my words and all of that, as opposed to the information out there now that can be regurgitated through AI.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I was telling my wife the other day, like I don't remember where the conversation started, but my favorite part of the entire process is not it has nothing to do with when the book is released. It's like the months leading up to the release where you are just like so deep in the words, and you're fighting with yourself, maybe fighting with your editor, whoever it is, to make sure that you get it right. And that really is, the most beautiful part of the journey. You wrote the book, but I mean, I want to just make sure I stick on this for a second, because even when you and I spoke a couple weeks ago, and you talk about the book, you do project a lot of humility around this, right? And I think that's awesome. But I think another thing that it does is it tells me that it's just a part of your mission, right? Like, you know, it's not, the book doesn't define you. You don't start off by introducing yourself as, "Hi, I'm Kyle, the author of Vitality." Right? And so, like, the Vitality System, excuse me. And so, um, you know, that says something about you. And so let's get now to the deeper mission, right? Like, let's get to, I'll break it down for you. When I wrote Break Barriers, I wrote it because I wanted to have the objective of helping people channel the mindset to overcome obstacles, personal, professional, or on the playing field. That then kind of became like the mission of the platform, is how can I help people channel the mindset to overcome obstacles? And then that ultimately birthed this podcast, which kind of brought people on to talk about their own journeys, their own stories, their own adversity, and how they channel their own mindset and kind of built their own toolkit. So when I think about what you're doing, you obviously have the skill set. You built up the acumen in the background. Now you have the thought leadership piece. Talk to me about what the grander objective is here.
Yeah, no, it's a great question, and I think about it in a couple ways. A short version for me is I want to constantly myself, just me myself, is I want to constantly be learning, evolving, inspiring, and creating, like constantly. Just I want to be in the weeds with this stuff. I want to continuously engage with it as opposed to thinking I've reached some level to where I'm an expert or anything like that. So that's kind of the start. But for me, whether it's book, whether it's podcast, whether it's newsletter, whether it's social media, whether it's in person events, speaking engagements, it's always to really one empower people to like take control of their health and wellness. But I think the bigger thing is, how do I help people redefine what it means to be healthy for them? And I think everybody kind of has their own concepts of what they think it means to be healthy, but I really want to help illuminate the whole field, give people a flashlight in a dark room to see like there's so much to health and wellness, there's so much to wellness, and on the mental side and all that. So I really want to help people redefine what it means to be healthy. And I can do that in so many different mediums. And that's why it's like you said, it's not about a book or a newsletter or a podcast. It's about reaching people with the right message at the right time in the right place. And so sometimes that means podcasts. So I love doing the podcast because that helps reach people, and they don't want to, sit down and read a book. They want to listen to it while they're cooking or in their car. And then sometimes for people, it's email. They spend so much time on email, they just want short snippets. And so, how can I do all of the hard, dirty work of really diving into the research, diving into the evidence, diving into the books, diving into all of that, synthesizing all of this complex information into digestible bites for people, digestible kind of excerpts that people can take, understand, but then apply. And so everything for me, it has to be about application, because you can know everything in the world and do nothing. And I think that's not what we want people. We want people to take action. And I think the more you know about certain topics, the more inclined you'll be to take action. And that's always how I've been. So yeah, the medium is irrelevant to me. I just want to reach people where they are. I want to synthesize complex information, and I want to give people the energy that I feel when I'm even talking about health and wellness, which like makes me want to run through a wall and continue learning and continue talking to, the world about it. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm coming from.
I love that. I think it's important, so we can kind of give the audience a little further glimpse into your life now. You're building a family, right? And you know, yeah, and that changes everything, right? Like once you get married, kids come into the picture. talk to me about how you're marrying the two, for lack of a better word there. But, like how you're marrying this mission with growing a family, and how you're, employing your takeaways from this in growing your family. I mean, look, you go back to your childhood, go back to what you experienced, and that clearly influenced a lot of things that happened thereafter. And in a way, you're trying to learn from that and make sure that you set your family up for success. So talk to me a little bit about, that dynamic at play.
Yeah, no, I'm glad that you brought that up, and I'm smiling ear to ear because yeah, it's that's kind of the heartbeat of it all, and that's the thing that allows me to have the energy and kind of fire that I do to go after these things is understanding that I'm going to be able to leave a legacy, and I'm going to be able to help my community and my family and the people around me live better, more vibrant lives. And so yeah, like me and my wife, it started with us. We met in college. We've been dating for over 10 years, and then we got married. And it was always like we had these goals and visions of what we wanted to accomplish, but professional life just kind of gets in the way. You start running the rat race. And eventually it's like, wait, our personal goals have kind of taken a back seat to all of our professional, stuff. And how do we flip the script on that? And so last year, we were married for a year. Last year, we were like, you know what? Let's full force commit, and kind of like what we called is like not deferring our happiness to down the line. Like we've always wanted to travel and we've always wanted to do like an extended trip. But again, when you're working, it's like, hey, can I take 3 months off or can I take 6 months off? That's not really a thing in the US. And so we were like, you know what? Let's cut ties. The professional world will always be here. Let's go after this thing because this is something that we truly believe we want to do. And so we did it. We quit our jobs when we were, at a point living in LA, great place in West Hollywood, making great money, like all checking all the boxes, all of that. But yeah, we dropped it all. We traveled to all 7 continents, 35 plus countries, and it was just the most incredible experience from a personal growth side, but also just seeing the world and seeing how everybody else lives and the cultures, the food, religion, and all of these things just broadens your perspective beyond just the health realm. And so I think that filled our cups completely up. And then yeah, and then come summer, we find out like we're pregnant and we're bringing a child into the world. We also got a puppy. So we started 2024 as a family of two, and starting 2025 as a family of four. And yeah, it just brings me joy to talk about and understand that we are kind of at the driver's seat of our own lives, and we're doing what we truly want to do as opposed to kind of going through the motions or letting someone else live our life for us. And so it's been incredible to one, have a partner that supports the crazy guy who wants to read all the books and listen to all the podcasts and write books of their own and do a podcast. It takes a very, very special partner to not only help with that, but just support and be the rock and be the foundation. I don't know how many conversations my wife has just had to kind of listen to me rant about a concept or a thing that I'm working on. And yeah, it's amazing to have that person, and now to have a child that you bring into the world that you get to help love and shape and mold and help them see the example that you're trying to set for not only yourself but the community around you. There's no more powerful thing in the world. So yeah, there's no plans of stopping or slowing any of that stuff. It's only amplified. And people think, oh, well, you have a kid and you have a dog now, you're not going to be able to have as much time and this and that. And it's like, no, for me, the
You're just
fire
getting
is ignited
started, man.
even
No, you
further.
bring them with you. You bring them with you for that ride because there's so much room for them on that ride too. Like a lot of it is going to apply to them, and especially with kids. This topic has come up several times on the show, and you'll notice this as your child gets older, right? Like kids do as you do; they don't do as you say, right? And that's one of the things that I think, you know, really sticks out with me with you is, and we talked about it several times on this episode, application, right? Just that word application. Like your child is going to see how you apply different values in different areas of your life. And that's how you are going to mold them to be the best versions of themselves, and allow them to, you know, be their fully authentic selves. And I think that's really, really important to call out. And it kind of goes back to what I was saying earlier about, the air of humility around the book. It's not like, hey, do this, do that, do this, do that. It's more so like, I'm going to do this and that, and I'm going to show you the results. And if these are results you're interested in, I'm here. Like, ask me. Like, let's talk. And I think that's really cool.
Yeah. I would say I definitely pride myself in understanding that there's multiple ways to get to us to the same outcome. So I think for me, I would never stand on a hill and be like, this is the way to do it. This is the only thing. I hate the words like always, only, never, because again, I think experts that you see on social media who are claiming their thing's the thing just shows how much that they actually don't know or how much they're pushing a certain agenda. And for me, I'm excited when somebody's like, hey, Kyle, like I've reached the same thing, but in this way, because that gives me another tool in the toolbox and another person I can help and kind of broaden my scope. So with the book, it's like it's a guide, it's a toolbox, it's kind of how do I plug and play? How do I read certain chapters that resonate with me? But it's definitely not like a declaration of you have to do this way. It's presenting the questions that you can ask. It's presenting the tools that you can use, and it's presenting a framework that you can look at all these topics and understand. Oh, with all this presented information, I can attack it this way, and this is the route I'm going to take. So yeah, I definitely am like the person who's always rooting for somebody to prove me wrong or rooting for a new concept to uproot things because that just means again, I always say the best information should win. And so again, for me, it's not about standing on any hills. It's not about being tied to any specific diet or exercise routine or whatever. It's about letting people find what works best for them in that situation.
I love that. I want to ask you a question just to kind of geek out a little bit.
Yep.
Back to the marathon that you recently ran.
Yep.
There are a lot of people out there who are, whether they're in the endurance circuit or they're, really big into these new hit events, hit events, like something like High Rocks, for instance, or previously, CrossFit, which lost a little bit of its touch recently. And a lot of people struggle with the transition in training regimen. I'll give you an example. I've been running all these marathons, and I actually recently signed up for a High Rocks, and I have no idea how I'm going to transition my training. I know I'm going to do it. I know I'm going to like get myself around the right people, and I'm going to figure it out. But because you did it, talk to me a little bit about what was the hardest part of that. How did you go about training for a marathon? And what did you have to work through, and what was the hardest part?
Yeah, well, first off, I love that you're throwing yourself into an unknown challenge. I think that's such a huge part of all of this is understanding that one, you don't have to have it all figured out, and two, those challenges are what bring the best out of you. And I think both your books speak to that very concept and kind of yeah, what you've been through in your life is inspiring just to start. Um, but I would say for this marathon, again, it was always something that I told myself internally. Kyle, you're a basketball player. You got bad knees. You shouldn't do this. It's something that you're not going to be able to do like the way you want to do it, and yada yada yada. So I tell myself all of these things, but that almost lights the fire of like because I think I can't do it, I'm going to try. And so in my life, a theme has always just been to try hard things, to challenge yourself, to put yourself in uncomfortable situations because from a young age with my father passing and the, kind of situations I've been in from then on, I've understood that through that, those tough times, those obstacles come some of the best successes and the best stories of my life. So again, whether it's travel, whether it's moving to San Francisco, whatever it is, taking a job that I didn't really know if I was ready for, all of these things have led to me becoming a better person, me becoming a more well-rounded person, and me becoming more humble in the process of understanding what it takes. So with the marathon, it was like, all right, Kyle, just set a plan. I had 4 months. I wanted to do it before the baby was born, so I started training in like August, July, and the marathon was December 1st. So I was like, 4 months, I'm going to show up each and every day, which is a theme in my life of really just trying to work on consistency and not necessarily doing 100% every day, but there's going to be a percentage that I'm there every day. And so I set that plan. I kind of pasted it up on my dresser. So I saw it every day of like, all right, this is what my workout is today, tomorrow, whatever. I focused on hydration recovery. I'm a coach and I'm big in this industry. So I could call on a lot of people to be like, hey, what do I do for this? What do I do for that? Which is amazing. And yeah, before you know it, it's like a month goes by and you're like, whoa, I was doing this run at this pace. And now I'm like 30 seconds faster or 20 seconds faster. And it's like, wow, like I'm seeing improvement. And I think the unique thing about running is that it knows no boundaries, like no age gap, no gender, no size, no anything. All you have to do, put some shoes on and go outside and run. Like it's just such a level playing field. And I love that. And so I always tell the story of I ran a half marathon with no training and anything. And I remember just saying like I was just dead. But you see people passing you, everything from people that are under the age of 15, people over the age of 70. And it really just inspired me to be like, you know what? I'm going to give this the training and the kind of time it deserves and see what I'm actually capable of. Because if a 75-year-old can run faster than me and I'm in great shape, like I feel like I'm, peak shape and all that, like then there's something that I'm missing. And so, yeah, I set out and, month after month, I got better. But I will
I
say the
I
race
just picture it
itself,
now, Men's Health model gets smoked by 70-year-old during half marathon.
yes, I
Yeah.
had my shirt off. I'm
Yeah.
like running, and I'm just getting just whizzed by all these people. And so, yeah, humbling experience, but also just yeah, that lights my fire of seeing that there's people that uh, devote that much time and energy to really improving at something each and every day, and that's where they can get to. And yeah, so the race day came and honestly felt like I was prepared. But of course, as life would have it, it ended up being like the coldest day of the year. It was probably like around 40s average up until then. And it was like 22 degrees. And I'm like, all right, didn't prepare for this, but it's all right. Like, let's go. Put my gloves on, hat, everything. I was cruising. And by mile 22, everything just like went down the drain. And I was about 100% sure that I was not going to finish. I was cramping in both my legs. My feet hurt. I had rocks in my shoes. My arms, like kind of where I was creased, were like sore and cramping. All the things, all the marathon things. People who run, they understand. But yeah, all I just kept focusing on is like, Kyle, just get to the next set, get to the next mile marker, get to the next thing. And you kind of just talk to yourself. And I could have easily gone the other way with negative self talk. But what I came back to was, Kyle, you showed up every single day for 4 months and trained for this marathon. Like, this is kind of the easy part, if you will. You've done the hard part. So, kind of get yourself through it and yeah, crossing the finish line, I was basically walking, but we made it through, and now I just have more fire to complete another one.
I love it. I love stories about those last 4 or 5 miles, like, that is the trend, right? Like, and that's really where you learn who you are, what you're made of, and, to kinda summarize it, right? Consistency, discipline, and mindset, and I think mindset embodies everything we've spoken about, on this episode, and really everything that, you are standing for and that you are, really laying the foundation for. I can't help but think of, your family and the impact that you're going to have now, on raising a little one. And so, Kyle, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for coming on. Thank you for opening up with us, for sharing about us. I think a lot of times we hear stories about people who lose parents at a young age, and um, obviously never met your father, but in just hearing you speak about him, I can feel him living through you and through what you're doing right now. And I think that's very special, and that says a lot about you. And it goes back to what I was saying earlier about just kind of this positive attitude that you put forth, despite the fact that it was a difficult thing to overcome for a young child under those circumstances. Um, and I'm just so excited to watch you continue to build, because I know that someone like you is going to be relentless in their path. So thanks for coming on, for sharing with us.
Yeah, man, I appreciate you having me. It's been a joy to talk, and I definitely feel my heart rate up, and I'm sweating, and I'm like, oh man, this is what I love, is to just talk to great people, communicate great information about health and wellness and life in general. But yeah, we're all going through stuff, and we've all been through stuff, and we all have challenges and all of that. But yeah, I just want to make sure that I'm exuding positive energy. I'm putting good out into the world because yeah, this I didn't do anything to get this life, so I want to make sure that I'm gifting back to the life that was given to me. And how I can do that is to help people live better lives, healthier lives. And yeah, I just love the word vitality, because I think it encapsulates everything that
I
I
feel
want to
it.
give people. It's like energy, strength, vibrance. Like that's me, and so that's why I love that word. And so yeah, it's been a hell of a journey. It's going to keep going. I'm going to continue to share, and I appreciate people like yourself who have inspiring stories, who share, who have the courage to talk about their journeys, but also who have the platform and want to give people like myself a platform to speak and to share and to yeah, spread joy into this world. So that's yeah, that's a mission. We're going to keep at it.
Thank you, brother. Pleasure's all mine. Thank you for listening today. If you enjoyed this episode of the Mile 40 podcast, go ahead, subscribe, leave a review, and share the word. Thank you for being a part of the Mile 40 family. And let's unite in showing the world that comebacks are always greater than setbacks.